My husband and I love to go driving. We prefer road trips. But on the weekends or nights, when we have nothing better to do, we go cruising and just drive around. We prefer smooth and not busy roads. On this particular night, we were bored and we decided to go cruising. We went up north to a small town about a half hour from the city where the roads are curvy and smooth. This town is close to the mountains, and if you follow this particular main street all the way up north, it starts driving up to a mountain. It's about 9 p.m., and there are very few cars on the roads already, since it's a small little cute town. But we keep going north away from the houses and stores and eventually to where the roads start curving uphill. We drive up for about 15 minutes more, and it's pitch black when we see some blinking lights. As we get closer, we see that a truck is on the side of the road facing us. I'm getting the chills thinking about being all the way up here in the middle of nowhere and a stranded truck on the side of the road. As he slowly approaches closer, I tell my husband it's probably for the best to turn back and that I had a bad feeling. But at this point, we were pretty much at the truck. As he pulls up next to the truck, a young blonde guy, maybe in his late 20s, comes around and gets next to our window. I get such a bad vibe by this, and I tell my husband not to put the window down. I think he also is getting a weird feeling because he actually listens. He kind of just loudly asks what's wrong, and the guy just says something's wrong with his truck and that he might need a hand. His phone is dead. My husband asked what happened, but the guy just insists on showing him and to come and take a look. He says it very friendly and even calls him bro and says that he's so glad that we pulled up. My husband says, "You know what, I won't be much help. I know nothing about cars, but let me call for help." He knows a lot about cars, but he was lying. The guy is insisting, and he gets visibly upset. I'm looking back at the truck, and I thought I caught movement inside of it. I told my husband that I think we should go, now. He probably saw the look of fear in my face because he put the car in reverse. But as he did, the guy that is now behind our car, acting stressed out, rubbing his face and kind of pacing. So, my husband decides to go forward instead then. We drive up for maybe 2 minutes, trying to find a place to turn around since the road is so narrow. The road turns to dirt road and there's a little more space on the side, so he is able to turn the car around. I am dreading going back that way now, and our phones have no signal at all. In my mind, I know that this all could really be someone with car problems. Maybe a friend is in the truck too. He never said that he was alone. I just can't help the bad feeling in my gut. We soon reach the area where the truck had been, but there's no truck at all. We drive down maybe another 5 minutes, but no trace of the truck, and we are sure that we had passed the place where it had been. Like I said, we didn't drive up too far to begin with. I am both relieved and terrified that the truck was no longer there. If it really had broken down, how did they get it to work again in such a short time? Calming myself down, I'm telling my husband, hey, maybe they really did get it to work. Maybe it turned on all of a sudden and they were able to drive off. Suspicious, but not impossible. As we keep driving through and the roads are straightening out, we notice far off the truck with all the lights off and parked to the side again, and we notice movement in the bed of the truck. I say out loud, "Why did they turn off all the lights?" I think they think that we are still too far away to see them. But we see 2 figures get on the other side of the truck and crouch down as if hiding. We get closer and my husband floors it. As we drive past, 2 men get up, One of them, the guy we had spoken to, and someone else. We get closer, and my husband floors it. As we drive past, two men get up. One of them, the guy that we had spoken to, and someone else, with a very surprised look in their faces. One of them runs behind us for a bit, and we see them get tinier in the back. I keep looking back terrified, but it's dark back there now when all of a sudden, I see the headlights turn on in the truck and start driving in our direction very fast. My husband keeps going fast and eventually, we lose the headlights. I keep looking back the rest of the way, so scared that they're somehow still following us. Maybe they turned off their lights again and we can't see them. Anyway, after driving for a very long time back to the city, we convince ourselves that no one is following us. We do call the non-emergency line and give a description of what we saw. No, we didn't get the plates in the truck. It was all so fast and in all the fear, I didn't think to get them. We just give a description of the guy that we saw, the type of truck it was, and so on. But there's really nothing that could be done. I realized all of this could be rationalized, but in the moment, we were filled with terror, being out there in the middle of nowhere and all the possibilities. They could have been armed. They could have put their truck sideways and left us with nowhere to go. They could have put something on the road to rip up our tires. And even though it could all have some explanation, there are still so many questions. Why couldn't he tell us what was wrong? How did the truck work again so fast? Why did they turn off all their lights? Why did they hide? It's been about a year and it's just a creepy experience now. We still go cruising, but usually we just stick to a little more civilized areas, at least for nighttime cruises. I used to ride a motorcycle as a sole method of transportation when I was studying, and I used to work on hotel cocktail bars during the summer holidays. 6 years ago, I was working at a historic, stereotypically grand hotel in a very rural area of the UK. I worked a long afternoon and evening into the night, finished cleaning up the bar around 2 a.m., and walked through the underbelly of the hotel to retrieve my motorcycle and make the journey home. I can still clearly remember the feeling of the crisp night air and the absolute pitch-black silence of the countryside after the hot and seemingly never-ending nights of serving drinks to dinner-goers and party-goers. It was always sort of intensely relaxing. Now that being an adult meant not being scared of the dark, or being outside on a motorcycle in the middle of nearly nowhere at 2 a.m. Riding through the local town took me a few minutes before I left to follow the dark country roads home. At this point, I rode a Honda 125cc, around 11 horsepower. Basic and old but clean, and it did the job. Regardless of its quirks, such as a dim headlight, which would dim and flicker even more when coming to a stop. I was riding along these pitch-black roads with fields and woods surrounding me, very much alone for 20 minutes. And then I saw a brief blast of bright blue headlights in my mirrors coming from behind. Moments later, dazzling headlights arrived behind me in seconds. Almost immediately, a large Range Rover pulls out to overtake me, blasting past barely inches away from me. I respond with a long blast on my horn. Big mistake. The Range Rover pulls in front of me and slams on the anchors, in what seemed like an attempt to have me lose control under sudden braking, or rear-end the Range Rover. Bikes can, even when they're old and rely on drum brakes, stop pretty quickly. So, I didn't rear-end the maniac in front. I came to a controlled stop. I see the door of the Range Rover crack open, and a figure begin to step out. I went for it, using all 11 horsepower of the little Honda's power, pulling an overtake. However, in those moments, this anger-crazed maniac had shut his door and stepped on the accelerator, causing us to be level and accelerating together when I reached his car. And then he started to run me off the road, pulling to the right, wedging me further over towards the ditch at the side of the road. This is where I ended up, struggling to control the bike on the wet, dew-heavy grass around the side of the road, trying to stop the 140-kilogram motorcycle dropping into the ditch. I struggled to regain balance, but managed to pull the bike back onto the road. At this point, I noticed the guy got back out of the Range Rover and walked around to the back, opened it up, and was reaching inside. I had turned the bike to face the other side of the road, ready to turn either way and make an escape from the escalating situation. Just as I looked to turn, I took one more look over at him to see him pulling a large, long object out of the back of the Range. I just went for it, taking another glance over my shoulder. After 200 meters to see, he had begun to continue driving up the road away from where I had run off the road. I slowed down to see what he would do next after driving away from me. He reached the top of the road and pulled over to the left, waiting for me, the lights reflecting on the road. It was freaking eerie. My heart was beating so fast, yet it felt like time had stopped. I just carried on in the opposite direction to find an alternate route home in the pitch black. Just before doing this, I checked my phone for signal to see that I had no reception at all. I was driving on the back roads on the edge of the city limits. It was dark, no lighting at all. A few rest stops here and there. I was meeting a woman off of Craigslist, already feeling a bit nervous. I was going pretty fast, no other cars in sight. Out of nowhere, I see a guy running across the road. He was already almost right in front of my car. It looked like he was getting chased by another guy who I didn't see until I swerved to avoid the first one while braking hard. My car went kind of sideways and hit the second guy pretty fierce, not at full speed. I heard a loud thud, but didn't actually see him get hit. My car ended up on the side of the road. The first guy seemed to have kept running out of sight. He wasn't there when I got out. This was a big red flag. But I had just hit someone, and I was worried that I'd off them. I was all shaky, and I had that sinking feeling in my stomach. I ran towards the guy who was on the floor, breathing heavily. Thank goodness he was alive. I asked him if he was okay. He didn't respond. He just kept breathing really hard. And then I took out my phone to call 911. As I was typing in the number, that's when I just heard him say, "No, don't call anyone. Don't call the cops." He said it pretty alarmed. So I just looked over at him with my phone in hand to flash on. I asked him if he could stand. He got up slowly with a slight limp. With my light shining on him, I could see that his clothes were all tattered, and he was wearing like 2 layers of clothing with a jacket. Now torn at the arms, he had blood on his arms, I guess from where he landed on the ground. He said, "I'm fine. Do you have any cigarettes?" I said, "Yeah, let me go get them." I had a pack in my glove box since forever. I was an occasional smoker and only smoked with my coworker. Not in a while though. We walked over to my car, and I got these cigarettes and I handed them to him. And then I put my phone to charge. The car was still on. As I did, he asked for a lighter. I said, "Yeah, hold on, let me look for it." While lighting his cigarette, that's when I asked him, "Who was the other guy?" He said, "Oh, someone who stole my backpack from me while I was sleeping." Oh, okay, he was definitely homeless then. I felt so bad. I started pulling out my wallet. I wanted to give him all the money in my wallet out of guilt. He looked fine now, albeit the bloody scraped arms, and his breathing had gotten normal. while pulling out my wallet and asking, "You sure you don't want me to call an ambulance?" And that's when I felt the sharpest pain rock my face. I saw all blurry for a couple of seconds. I started stumbling. My body felt like I was about to fall over. Dizzy, when I came to, I saw my car pulling away and driving off. He punched me and took off, and left me with a pretty bad headache. I stood there in shock for what seemed like an eternity. I reached for my phone out of instinct, and then I remembered that I had left it charging. Crap. I reached under my jacket to check if my gun was still on me. I felt relieved when I felt the cold metal of my Sig Sauer. Okay, good. At least I ain't out here defenseless. I kept walking down the road endlessly, hoping to find someone. I'm pissed off and scared. A few good miles later, I see some lights. As I get closer, I see it's one of those public restrooms. With nothing else in sight. Great, there might be a payphone. And now what do I see next? I couldn't believe my eyes. There's a car that looks just like mine parked right out front. I take a peek. The guy that took my car is asleep. It looks like he cleaned his arms off. No jacket. That moron. He could have kept driving, but I'm glad he didn't. I take out my gun and I try to open the door. It's locked. I try all of the doors. Locked. I didn't want to wake him up by banging on the car because I was afraid that he was going to drive off. I looked all over the ground. Nothing to break the window, so I holster my gun, take off my jacket, and wrap it around my hand. I smash through it, glass spilling everywhere. The guy jerks awake and starts fumbling around. All the while, I drop the jacket and rapidly unholster my gun again. I'm pointing my gun right at his head, and he says, "Please don't shoot me." Instead of saying sorry, he says that stuff. I tell him to get out and walk towards the wall with his back turned. So I backed up and he complied. I tell him not to move, and then ask him where my keys are. After I got my keys from him, I drove off, with glass all over the inside of my car. I never called the cops because I had hit him earlier, and then because I pulled my gun on him. I was scared and worried about the legality of it. Also, I had bought it from an arms list, but the seller never signed the bill of sale, only I did. So I was sketched about that as well. The last thing I need is them checking my gun after he tells them about it, and finding out the guy who sold me it reported it as stolen. I probably would have been fine calling them, but I was tripping. I never met the Craigslist chick. I went home. I used to live in a part of Memphis, Tennessee that was a little shaky. I was right on the edge of what someone would call the ghetto. But also, there is a nearby area that was pretty secluded and desolate, as I lived on the outskirts of the city. Kind of near the industrial part near Raleigh for anyone familiar. Anyway, I was an 8-year-old boy when this happened, and my sister was 5 years my senior. The two of us went for walks on occasion. This time, we went to the back of the housing division and further than we had gone before. This area was pretty dirty and desolate for such a city. Just train tracks and a nearby industrial facility. Lots of dried tan grass coming through spots in the railroad gravel. Lots of dusty crap people dumped illegally around the tracks. There used to be a pack of stray dogs that walked around my neighborhood. But other than that, no people or cars would really ever be seen out there. Not that far behind my neighborhood anyway. We were just walking along the tracks, talking, throwing rocks, when I saw some strange movement just beyond the tree line of the small wooded area about 40 feet ahead and on the left a bit. I told my sister to look as we walked a bit closer. We made it to about 10 to 15 feet away from the wooded area, when we realized the movement was in fact a mime of all things. In the middle of nowhere seemingly, hidden amongst the trees and thick dead vines that adorn the edge of the wooded area. Painted face, black striped shirt with black pants. He had the exaggerated expressions of a mime too. His eyes got really wide and he seemed to start performing for us at the moment. He was kind of doing it in a way too, I guess, to attract us. Maybe entice us into the wooded area where he stood, or lurked for that matter. I honestly couldn't tell you much about him, as we ran away quickly. I do, however, remember that it was very hot outside that day, and his makeup was all pretty dingy and gross, as were his clothes. I know this sounds pretty unbelievable, but I assure you that it happened. Otherwise, it would be posted somewhere else. I sometimes wonder who that mime was. I'm sure he wasn't there to do anybody any harm, but who knows what would have happened if we would have gone into that thicket. And why there? He was just simply insane, I think. His mind was gone. Which is far more creepy than any kidnapping stranger I have read about.